Now that the Odin grind is over, I've done some testing with Ghost, and I want to share some info that I've compiled in this spreadsheet. But before we go through the spreadsheet together, and don't worry, we will go back to it, you don't need to pause the video on that screen or anything, I want to show you guys how I set things up. So this was my mastery setup for half of the test, and then I put 1 point in glass cannon, 1 point in recoil, and maxed out liquid courage and double edge for the second half of the tests. Now I went up against Winter Soldier, and I brought in Wasp for every single one of these fights. You can see here, no suicides, Ghost plus Wasp. And what I did is I phased 2 hits, I hit him with a medium. Phased 2 hits, hit him with a medium. It takes, if you do that, it takes 5 mediums in total. And then you could just send a special 2. And in total, I stopped the clock as soon as that last hit landed. So 14.133 seconds. And for the purposes of this testing, I just chopped off that final 3, 14.13 seconds. Now what I've done is I've used that time as a constant for the rest of these fights. This way my performance doesn't really matter, because it's gonna change. It's gonna fluctuate. Sometimes the AI is not cooperating. And what I've done is I went and just reenacted this test with all the different synergy teams. Now I'm running suicides with Ghost and Wasp. I recorded the medium attacks with those initial furies and without. Then I went through here, did this exact same thing with Ant-Man on the team, and finally, once again, we have Odin with the pre-fight. So this is the final fight, and you can see it definitely is much different. It's much sloppier than that initial test that I showed you, but it's the full team: Ghost, Wasp, Ant-Man, Odin, and Suicides. And I'll let this entire fight play out, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the spreadsheet itself, and you can see all the difference in damage numbers. But basically, all the numbers are there. If you want to play back and go through the different parts of the video yourself, you could certainly do that. But these are those numbers. So once again, this entire column right here, these are all of the medium crits. In blue, this is without suicides, right? This top blue section. Then we have this orange section, which does have the suicides. And what I did is I averaged the numbers. You can see this 4162 number right here. That is the medium attack without the fury. The 9230 number, that is with those initial furies at the start of the fight. You can see it's a massive difference. And I did the same thing once again with Ghost and Wasp, Ghost, Wasp, and Ant-Man, Ghost, Wasp, Ant-Man, and Odin. And I just averaged these numbers as if I could, sometimes hit 2 or 3 medium attacks with those Furies active. Actually, in that final run I showed you, I only got 1 hit with the Furies active. But again, man, the performance, it's going to fluctuate, and that was a really bad run. But all I needed was the actual numbers out of it, and that's what I got here. Then I recorded by the way, in yellow, this is completely without averaging in the Fury numbers at all. This is after the Furies drop off all of what the numbers will be. I also took, in this column here, you can see the special 2 damage totals. I included that. And then I took the total damage of the 5 medium hits. So this number times 5 plus the special 2 damage. And I got this number here. Then what I did is I took the total damage number and I divided it by 14.13 seconds to get the damage per second. That's what DPS is, damage per second. And these are those numbers right here. So you can see here that, with no suicides, just Ghost and Wasp on the team, Ghost DPS right out of the gate, it's not that impressive. It actually can get really impressive if you do, heavy attacks to get those Furies, and once you get the cruelty buffs. But I want to leave that stuff out of this test. Those numbers, of course, those are important to figure out as well, but kind of goes beyond the scope of what I was trying to do with this test. And maybe at a later date, I can test those numbers as well. But I wanted to just get the numbers as if I was going through in the most casual Ghost gameplay possible. If I'm going into a quest and I've got a really hard opponent and tough nodes to deal with, the chances are I'm not going to be doing heavy attacks to get the Furies going. So this is like the most basic Ghost gameplay that you can have, really. And with just Ghost and Wasp on the team, it was only 2752 DPS. with that setup. So that's why people don't usually use Ghost without suicides too much. But then once you put Ant-Man on the team, you could see the damage went up quite a bit. It went up by 946 DPS. And then when I put Odin on the team, it went up a whole lot more. It went up an additional 1,216 DPS. So look at this difference, man. Just Ghost by yourself, or well, with Wasp to have that unblockable special too. And then once you pump out the rest of the synergies, we're talking about nearly doubling her damage. Not quite, but nearly doubling Ghost damage, which is pretty crazy, man. It's a night and day difference, absolutely. And what you'll notice is that let's look at the box down here. This is once again post Furies. So as if the initial Furies never happened, even though I was running suicides. You could see here just with Ghost and Wasp, which is fairly common to see, Ghost, Wasp, and Hood, right? A lot of people will run those three champions and they won't bring Ant-Man, won't bring Odin. You can see the DPS for something like this was 4980, which is very close to this 4915 number, which if you guys remember what I talked about when I got Odin in the results video, I said having Odin is essentially like having the suicide masteries just for Ghost. I have 14 mastery points left over, and if I'm not putting any in Glass Cannon, Recoil, Liquid Courage, Double Edge, that's an additional 8 mastery points that I can sink somewhere else. So I can get I could actually increase my damage by putting those points elsewhere if I want to, or just pump out some of my other champions, like maybe let's say I run Nick Fury a lot, then maybe I would max out Deep Wounds, which is something that probably would not be able to do when running the full suicide mastery setup as well, especially because I usually like to run points in Mystic Dispersion. So technically you could have whatever mastery build you want, but the point is it's essentially as if you have the suicide masteries with Ghost without suffering the negative downside of that recoil damage, if you compare these two numbers. Now the damage, if you notice the increased damage, it's pretty consistent. There's actually a very slight variance, and I think that might have to do with the way the game rounds the damage in game, perhaps, because the numbers are very slightly off, but they're very consistent. Throwing Ant-Man on the team, whether you are factoring in the Furies at the start of the fight when shrugging off the suicides, not having suicides at all, or completely eliminating those Furies, it will increase your damage or your DPS by about 950. And then Odin, again, same thing. No matter what setup we're talking about here, will increase your DPS by a little over 1200. And that's I don't have. That's not factoring in his aptitude, because the aptitude will, of course, increase the amount of attack they're gaining from Ghost's Furies. But in this test, I had no Furies. I had passive Furies, but the aptitude, I believe, only works against the active Fury buffs. 99.9% sure. I didn't double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Anyway, so you can see, the Odin synergy, it definitely does something. There's a lot of people out there that think that, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter because Ghost has so much damage to begin with anyway. And to some extent, I get that, because I like to think of like Jeff Bezos, for example. I mean, the dude, I don't know how much money he has, but it's over 100 billion, right? You think he's paying attention to every new billion that comes in? It's pocket change to him at this point. So what does it matter? But in the grand scheme of things, that $billion extra is still $1 billion extra. It's still a ton of money. Just like finding a way to increase your DPS by 1200 just for throwing another champion on the team, or having an alliance mate, or maybe before you swap out Odin as an incursion support champion, finding that extra damage is still really meaningful. Is it necessary all the time? No. But is it going to help you out in pretty much any situation you could think of? I mean, unless we're talking about if the damage is capped with rage or something like that. But in most situations, dude, give me the extra 1200 DPS. I mean, look at this. Even when we're factoring in the Furies, right? When we're averaging in the Fury numbers, it still takes it from the Ghost, Wasp, and Ant-Man team having 68. 24 DPS to over 8,000 DPS. And again, this is just like the most basic way to play Ghost. If you are building up Furies, then technically you will be gaining more than 1200 DPS. It'll still be a smaller, maybe total percentage because you're gaining attack through other means, but you're actually, in those situations, you would actually gain more than 1200 DPS. This, by the way, all of this testing is done with either no cruelties with the medium attacks, and when you pop a special 2, you gain 1 cruelty. So when you gain more cruelties, that additional base attack is basically being multiplied against those cruelties. So the DPS increase when you get those 5 cruelties with Ghost, it would actually be higher than 1200 as well. Again, we're talking about, this is the absolute most basic, the minimal amount of DPS increase you're going to gain from Odin. So it only goes up. The amount of DPS, it only goes up. The more skilled, the longer the fight, because you're gaining more of those cruelties. So this is the minimum right here. And in my opinion, this is huge. And again, the way that I'm playing the game right now, where I cannot run suicide, well, I mean, I could technically if I wanted to keep swapping my masteries back and forth mid-war frequently, but for the majority of the fights that I'm in, I'm using Torch. So I don't want to keep swapping off the suicide masteries. So instead, this is my questing team: Ghost, Wasp, Ant-Man, Odin, and whoever else. And it's as if I have the suicide masteries on, because when you compare these two numbers, they are almost identical. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I know there's a lot of confusion about the actual impact that Odin will have if you're using Ghost. And, you know, like I said, for the most part, I don't really care what other people do. If you want to use other champions, by all means. But I figured I would share this information just to try to, I don't know, just for the sake of sharing information, I guess. But if you don't want to play Ghost, don't play Ghost. But she's damn powerful even without suicides with a setup like this, and that does leave that 1 slot open still. And also keep in mind that Odin is getting buffed, so maybe he's not going to completely suck afterwards. And yeah, the team setup actually can get you through most things in this game. So in any case, hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown, and that'll do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.